Here's the scary truth. Most homes would run out of food in just a few days during a serious emergency, but a handful of foods can survive for decades without refrigeration. Some never truly expire at all, and the number one item surprises almost everyone. White rice became a survival staple long before modern grocery stores existed. Most people see white rice as one of the most basic foods imaginable. It sits quietly on grocery store shelves in huge bags, costs relatively little, and rarely gets much attention unless prices suddenly increase or stores begin running low. But there is a reason rice has remained one of the most trusted staple foods across different countries and generations. It works when other foods fail. One of the biggest reasons white rice stores so well comes down to the milling process. Brown rice contains natural oils inside the bran layer, and those oils eventually turn rancid over time. White rice has that outer layer removed, which dramatically slows spoilage. When stored properly in airtight containers with oxygen absorbers and kept in cool, dry conditions, white rice can remain usable for decades. That is not internet hype. Food storage research and long-term preparedness studies consistently support it. What makes rice especially valuable is how flexible it becomes during difficult situations. A single bowl can completely change depending on what gets added to it. Rice can stretch canned vegetables, combine with lentils for protein, absorb flavor from bouillon cubes, or turn canned chicken into a full meal. In situations where food options become limited, flexibility matters more than people expect. Eating the same exact thing every day wears people down mentally much faster than most realize beforehand. Another reason rice matters is calorie efficiency. It stores compactly compared to the amount of energy it provides. That is one reason many families around the world have relied on it for centuries during uncertain times. Rice is not flashy, but dependable foods rarely are. The foods that quietly sit on shelves for years without demanding refrigeration or complicated storage conditions are usually the ones that become most valuable when daily routines suddenly change. Lentils quietly solve multiple problems at once. Many people build food storage around carbohydrates and forget how important protein becomes during long-term disruptions. Calories matter, but meals stop feeling satisfying very quickly when protein disappears. Lentils solve that problem in one of the simplest and most affordable ways possible. Dry lentils store exceptionally well when protected from moisture and oxygen. Under proper conditions, they can remain nutritionally useful for many years. Unlike some dried beans that require extended cooking times, lentils cook relatively quickly, and that becomes extremely important when fuel, electricity, or cooking time become limited. The nutritional value is one reason preparedness experts consistently recommend them. Lentils provide plant-based protein, fiber, iron, and complex carbohydrates in a compact form. They also help create meals that actually feel filling rather than temporary snacks that leave people hungry again an hour later. One detail that often gets overlooked is how adaptable lentils are with flavor. Plain lentils are fairly mild on their own, but they absorb seasoning extremely well. Add canned tomatoes, broth powder, garlic, spices, or canned meat, and the meal changes completely. That ability to prevent flavor fatigue becomes critical during longer disruptions. People often imagine emergency food as bland survival rations that simply keep the body functioning. The reality is more complicated. Food affects mood, motivation, patience, and emotional stability. Meals that still feel enjoyable help people stay calmer and more organized during stressful situations. Lentils work because they balance nutrition, affordability, and versatility without requiring complicated preparation. Honey is one of the most stable natural foods ever discovered. Honey has one of the most unusual reputations of any food people commonly keep at home. Archaeologists have discovered sealed honey in ancient containers that remained preserved for incredibly long periods. That sounds almost impossible until you understand the science behind it. Pure honey contains very little available moisture, and its acidic nature creates an environment where bacteria struggle to survive. That combination dramatically slows spoilage. Properly sealed honey can remain usable for extremely long periods if stored correctly and protected from contamination and excess moisture. What makes honey especially useful is that it serves multiple purposes at once. It provides quick energy, improves flavor in bland meals, and works well in drinks, baking, oatmeal, and simple snacks. During stressful periods, comfort foods matter much more than people expect. A small amount of sweetness can completely change how repetitive meals feel emotionally. There is also a common misunderstanding about crystallized honey. Many people throw it away because they assume crystals mean spoilage. In reality, crystallization is a completely natural process caused by glucose separating over time. Gently warming the container in warm water usually restores the smoother texture without damaging the honey. Honey also stores conveniently. It does not require refrigeration and remains ready to use straight from the container. Foods that ask very little from you become extremely valuable during difficult situations because mental energy matters too. People under stress make worse decisions when every task feels complicated. Simple foods reduce pressure. Salt stayed valuable across entire civilizations for a reason. Today, salt feels ordinary because it is cheap and widely available. But historically, it shaped trade routes, economies, and food preservation systems across entire regions. Long before refrigeration existed, preserving food depended heavily on salt. Salt itself does not spoil when kept dry. That alone makes it important for long-term storage. But the real reason salt matters is because it protects other foods too. It helps preserve meats, supports fermentation, and slows bacterial growth in multiple preservation methods that humans have used for generations. The human body also requires sodium for fluid balance, nerve function, and muscle activity. That becomes even more important during physically demanding situations where sweating and dehydration increase. Many people focus only on calories when building emergency supplies and forget that nutritional balance still matters. Preparedness experts often recommend plain, non-iodized salt for very long storage periods because iodine additives may slowly degrade over time. That does not make iodized salt unsafe for normal use, but plain salt tends to remain more stable for bulk storage. Another important detail is morale. Food without seasoning becomes mentally exhausting surprisingly quickly. Even basic meals improve dramatically with small amounts of salt and seasoning. During extended disruptions, maintaining appetite matters because people sometimes begin eating less, simply because meals become repetitive and unpleasant. Sugar lasts longer than most people realize. Sugar often gets treated like a comfort item rather than a practical survival food, but that misses several important points. Properly stored white sugar can remain usable indefinitely if moisture stays out. Bacteria and microorganisms struggle to survive in dry sugar because the environment simply does not support growth. Historically, sugar has also been used as a preservation tool. Fruit preserves, syrups, and jams rely heavily on sugar's ability to reduce available moisture for spoilage organisms. Before modern refrigeration, this method played a huge role in extending food shelf life. Sugar also provides rapid energy. During physically or mentally demanding situations, quick carbohydrates can help maintain energy levels when people are exhausted or under stress. That does not mean living entirely on sugar is healthy, but in emergency situations, fast energy sources become valuable. The psychological side matters too. Meals affect emotional stability much more than most people think. A little sweetness can make repetitive foods feel more normal and less emotionally draining. People function better when meals still feel familiar rather than purely functional. One mistake people make is storing sugar incorrectly. Sugar hardens when exposed to moisture. But hard sugar is not spoiled sugar. It simply needs to be broken apart or softened. Keeping it in sealed, moisture-proof containers prevents most problems before they start. Canned vegetables become more important. The longer fresh food disappears. Fresh produce disappears quickly during supply disruptions because it relies heavily on transportation and refrigeration. That is when canned vegetables suddenly stop looking boring. The canning process uses heat and airtight sealing to prevent spoilage. Properly stored canned vegetables often remain safe for years beyond printed dates as long as the cans stay undamaged. Swollen, leaking, or heavily corroded cans should always be avoided, but intact cans generally maintain safety far longer than many people assume. Nutritionally, canned vegetables still provide fiber, minerals, and important vitamins, even though some nutrient loss happens during processing. They also bring variety to meals built around rice, oats, lentils, and noodles. That variety matters psychologically because repetitive meals become draining over time. One overlooked advantage is hydration. The liquid inside canned vegetables contains usable fluid, which becomes important when clean water access becomes less reliable. Foods that support both nutrition and hydration quietly become much more valuable during difficult situations. Canned vegetables also require very little effort. Open the can and eat if necessary. During stressful periods, convenience matters more than people expect. Food that reduces preparation time and mental effort helps people conserve energy for more important tasks. Oats deliver more value than most people expect. Oats rarely get attention compared to trendy survival foods, but nutritionally and practically, they are one of the strongest pantry staples available. When stored properly in airtight containers and protected from heat and moisture, oats can remain stable for very long periods. Nutritionally, oats provide fiber, carbohydrates, iron, and steady energy release that helps people stay full longer. That steady energy becomes useful during stressful conditions where regular meals may become less predictable. Another reason oats work so well is flexibility. Oats can become warm breakfasts, no-bake snacks, soup thickeners, baked foods, or emergency meals mixed with powdered milk and dried fruit. They adapt easily without requiring complicated ingredients. Warm meals also carry emotional value. A bowl of oatmeal during a stressful morning feels different from grabbing dry snack food. Familiar routines matter more than people realize until routines disappear. Maintaining simple habits helps reduce emotional exhaustion during uncertain periods. Oats are also affordable and easy to rotate into normal daily meals, which matters because long-term storage works best when people actually eat what they store, instead of buying foods that sit untouched for years. If this list is already changing the way you look at everyday pantry foods, take a second to subscribe because some of the foods coming up next are the ones people almost always underestimate until they suddenly need them. Powdered milk solves a major storage problem. Fresh dairy products become difficult to manage very quickly when refrigeration becomes unreliable. Powdered milk exists specifically to solve that issue. Non-fat dry milk can remain nutritionally useful for many years when stored correctly in cool, dry conditions away from oxygen and humidity. It provides calcium, protein, and vitamins that become harder to replace when fresh milk disappears. Most people think about drinking milk, but powdered milk becomes especially useful in cooking. It improves soups, breads, pancakes, oatmeal sauces, and baked foods. Multi-purpose ingredients become extremely valuable during disruptions because they support multiple meals without taking up excessive storage space. The flavor difference between powdered and fresh milk is real. Pretending otherwise makes advice less trustworthy. But practical food storage is not about perfection. It is about maintaining nutrition and flexibility when normal grocery access becomes unpredictable. Storage after opening matters a lot. Exposure to moisture and oxygen shortens shelf life significantly, which is why transferring powdered milk into airtight containers helps maintain quality much longer. Canned meat becomes critical when fresh protein disappears. Fresh meat depends heavily on refrigeration and transportation, which makes it one of the first foods affected during supply disruptions. Canned meat solves that problem by providing shelf-stable protein ready to eat immediately. Tuna, chicken, salmon, sardines, and similar products remain safe for years when stored properly. The heat treatment and sealed environment used during canning dramatically slow spoilage. Protein becomes increasingly important during stressful situations because the body relies on it for muscle maintenance, recovery, and overall function. Meals built entirely around carbohydrates often leave people feeling unsatisfied even when calorie intake remains adequate. Canned fish provides additional benefits because many varieties contain omega-3 fatty acids and minerals that become harder to obtain from limited diets. Nutritional variety matters more during long disruptions because deficiencies become more likely when food choices narrow. Convenience also matters. Open the can and eat. No preparation, no water, and no fuel required. Foods that remove extra steps reduce stress during emergencies where mental bandwidth may already feel stretched thin. Cooking oils and fats quietly hold entire meal plans together. This is one category people consistently underestimate while building emergency food supplies. Carbohydrates and protein matter, but dietary fat is essential for vitamin absorption, hormone production, and calorie density. Fat also changes the eating experience completely. Rice cooked with seasoning and oil feels far more satisfying than dry rice alone. That difference becomes increasingly important over time. Most cooking oils last between 1 and 3 years depending on storage conditions. Heat, oxygen, and light accelerate spoilage. Ghee generally stores longer because the milk solids have been removed, making it more stable at room temperature. Fat provides concentrated calories, which becomes valuable when physical demands increase. It also helps meals feel filling and satisfying instead of temporary. Long-term food planning that ignores satisfaction usually fails because people become exhausted by repetitive low-fat meals. Another overlooked point is cooking flexibility. Oils allow sautéing, frying, baking, and flavor development that dramatically improve basic foods. Small amounts can completely change how meals feel emotionally. Freeze-dried fruits preserve variety and morale. Fresh fruit disappears quickly during transportation issues because it spoils relatively fast. Freeze-dried fruit solves that problem through moisture removal while preserving much of the flavor and nutritional content. Properly stored freeze-dried fruits can remain usable for decades. Strawberries, bananas, apples, and blueberries become lightweight, compact foods that provide sweetness and variety without refrigeration. The emotional impact of fruit matters more than people expect. Long periods of eating only savory staple foods eventually become mentally exhausting. Sweet flavors and familiar snacks help preserve morale and appetite. Canned fruit also deserves attention because it remains affordable and widely available. While it generally has a shorter shelf life than freeze-dried products, it still provides useful nutrition and variety for years. One reason people underestimate variety is because they imagine emergencies lasting only briefly. But even moderate disruptions can stretch for weeks or months. During longer periods, emotional fatigue becomes just as important as physical hunger. Instant coffee helps preserve normal routines. A surprising number of preparedness experts include coffee in long-term food storage, and the reason goes beyond caffeine. Freeze-dried instant coffee stores well when sealed properly and requires nothing except hot water. During stressful situations, familiar routines provide structure and emotional stability. A simple morning cup of coffee helps preserve a sense of normal life when everything else feels uncertain. Caffeine itself improves alertness and concentration, which can help during exhausting situations. But psychologically, coffee often matters even more than physiologically. Humans rely heavily on routines. Losing every familiar habit at once increases stress dramatically. Instant coffee also stores compactly and prepares quickly without equipment. Foods and beverages that demand very little effort become more valuable during emergencies because they reduce mental strain. Many people dismiss comfort items during preparedness discussions, but experienced planners understand something important. Emotional stability affects judgment, patience, and decision-making. Small comforts are not luxuries when stress becomes constant. Bouillon cubes completely transform basic meals. Bouillon cubes seem tiny and insignificant until meals become repetitive for days at a time. Then suddenly they feel incredibly important. Rice, oats, lentils, noodles, and canned vegetables all improve dramatically with broth flavor added. That sounds minor at first, but flavor fatigue becomes a genuine issue during extended disruptions. People sometimes begin eating less simply because meals become emotionally exhausting. Bouillon cubes also help stretch ingredients efficiently. Soups allow small amounts of protein and vegetables to feed more people while improving hydration at the same time. Warm, savory meals carry emotional comfort too. During stressful periods, temperature and flavor influence mood more than people realize beforehand. A hot seasoned meal feels reassuring in ways difficult to appreciate until comfort becomes limited. Storage is another advantage. Bouillon cubes take up very little space, remain usable for long periods, and cost relatively little compared to the amount of flavor they provide. Ramen quietly becomes useful during emergencies. Ramen often gets dismissed because it is associated with cheap convenience food, but shelf-stable noodles provide several practical advantages during difficult situations. Dry ramen stores well because of its low moisture content. Proper packaging and cool storage conditions help extend shelf life significantly. The packet versions generally hold up better long-term than foam cup varieties. Ramen alone is not nutritionally complete, and it should not be treated as a perfect survival food. But paired with vegetables, canned meats, eggs, or lentils, it becomes a fast and practical meal base. The speed matters. Emergencies create stress and exhaustion. Quick meals reduce pressure and conserve time, fuel, and mental energy. Foods that simplify routines become more valuable than people expect. Another important detail is comfort. Warm noodles feel familiar. Familiar foods help preserve emotional stability during uncertain periods. That psychological factor keeps appearing throughout long-term food planning because it genuinely matters. Wheat berries solve a problem most people never notice. Many people store flour without realizing flour itself has a relatively limited shelf life compared to whole grains. Milling exposes natural oils inside the grain to oxygen, which slowly leads to rancidity. Wheat berries avoid that issue because the grain remains intact. Properly stored wheat berries can remain stable for decades while preserving nutritional value and the ability to produce fresh flour later. That flexibility is one reason serious long-term storage plans often include whole grains. Wheat berries can be ground into flour when needed or cooked whole for soups, grain bowls, and other meals. Whole grains also provide texture and variety compared to highly processed foods. Variety matters more over long periods because repetitive textures and flavors contribute to appetite fatigue. The ability to create fresh flour years later gives wheat berries a major advantage over storing large amounts of pre-ground flour alone. Stability increases dramatically when natural protective layers remain intact. Peanut butter combines convenience, nutrition, and comfort better than almost anything else. Many survival foods are practical but emotionally unappealing. Peanut butter stands out because it handles both sides extremely well. It provides dense calories, healthy fats, protein, magnesium, vitamin E, and convenience all in one relatively inexpensive jar. It requires no preparation, no heating, and no extra water. Open the lid and eat. Properly stored unopened peanut butter generally remains usable well beyond printed dates. Natural varieties may separate more because they contain fewer stabilizers, but separation does not automatically mean spoilage. What really makes peanut butter valuable is the emotional side. After days or weeks of repetitive meals, familiar comfort foods carry enormous psychological value. A spoonful of peanut butter feels normal, recognizable, and reassuring. People often imagine emergencies as dramatic moments, but most real disruptions are slower and more frustrating. Price increases, transportation delays, temporary shortages, storms, and financial pressure affect households constantly. Foods that reduce stress during those situations become genuinely important. Peanut butter also works with many other foods. Spread it on crackers, stir it into oatmeal, combine it with powdered milk, or eat it directly. That versatility helps prevent meals from becoming emotionally draining. The biggest mistake many people make with food storage is assuming preparedness requires expensive specialty products or extreme planning. In reality, many of the most dependable long-term foods are already sitting in ordinary grocery stores. Rice, lentils, oats, canned vegetables, salt, sugar, canned meats, and peanut butter have remained reliable across generations because they consistently solve practical problems. The goal is not fear, the goal is flexibility. Having dependable food at home reduces stress when prices rise, stores run low, or unexpected disruptions interrupt normal routines. Preparation creates options before problems appear. Another important lesson hidden inside all these foods is that survival is not purely about calories. Comfort matters, familiarity matters, flavor matters. People think more clearly and handle stress better when meals still feel human instead of purely functional. Long-term food planning works best when it focuses on realistic habits rather than fantasy scenarios. Store foods you already eat, rotate supplies regularly, build gradually instead of panic buying all at once. Small, consistent preparation usually works far better than dramatic last-minute decisions. Now here's the question. Which one of these foods surprised you the most, and which item do you think people underestimate the most when building an emergency pantry? And if you want the next breakdown on foods that look useful, but actually fail badly in long-term storage, check out the next video.